if you care about the environment, if you care about nature, if you care about the future of the planet, of humanity, then this is just one way to try and make a difference.
The rapidly growing industry generated by the mainstreaming of psychedelics in the global north is often far removed from the needs and struggles of indigenous peoples. Indigenous communities are under constant threat from the myriad forces of globalization, such as deforestation, economic instability, food insecurity, and lack of political autonomy, all of which is amplified in the context of a global pandemic. While these threats are growing, Indigenous people remain at the forefront of combating environmental degradation and climate change. However, less than 1% of philanthropy in the US goes to Indigenous groups, and the majority goes through non-Indigenous organizations, much of which fails to reach people on the ground. In response to these problems, Chacruna has recently launched the Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas.
The Indigenous Reciprocity Initiative of the Americas, or IRI for short, is a curated resource featuring organizations from South and Central America and North America, broken down by region with descriptions giving a glimpse into each project. The goal of IRI is to promote community-led and grassroots projects that are designed and implemented by local Indigenous people, and to garner investment into biocultural conservation through the lens of psychedelic plants. The guiding principle of IRI is really the self-determined needs of local groups and local people. So these are all Indigenous-led and Indigenous-driven initiatives. It's a wide variety of projects that address everything from environmental conservation, reforestation, food security, educational institutional support, land tenure, really anything that the community is dealing with and considers a priority. It is a resource with all of the communities and projects laid out for people to visit, and they can go directly to those organizations and donate. There's also a program where larger donors, as well as investors, private donors, can give large amounts, and Chacruna takes a 7.5% fee and then distributes those funds evenly between each of the organizations. One of the reasons that I think this approach is unique and especially effective is because it avoids intermediaries wherever possible. It kind of cuts out as much of that overhead and infrastructural obstacles as possible, and it allows for things to be driven by the community itself. So they have ownership over the projects, they have autonomy, they're not bound to any authority above them that's monitoring them other than the one that they've set up themselves. I think that one of the values instilled by psychedelics, or at least one of the lessons that people tend to learn, is a greater connection to their environment and to nature. And the truth is that Indigenous people are on the forefront of the fight against environmental destruction and climate change. It's been shown that Indigenous managed lands harbor more biodiversity, they have greater capacity for carbon storage. All of the markers of ecological health are in greater abundance in Indigenous lands than they are in protected areas, national parks, reserves, places where people have been pushed off the land. Also, just the history of psychedelics is really inextricable from Indigenous culture. The relationship with psychedelic plants and plant medicines is very much tied to Indigenous history and Indigenous tradition. And there are many parallels in the sort of therapeutic protocols and the rituals that people have adopted that can be traced back to Indigenous cultures, not to mention the plants themselves, the compounds themselves, even the second generation psychedelics and the synthetics all have a connection to indigenous plant medicines. I think that any company that's making enormous money, enormous profits from the psychedelics industry, which is exploding, there's just going to be a massive amount of wealth going in one direction. And so IRI is trying to sort of rebalance that a little bit. So that's where the reciprocity comes in.